Well, hello. As you can see, I'm not in my usual place, and I'm not even sitting with the camera that I usually use. Today, I happen to be in Auckland, and I was noticing that the episode for tomorrow, which is the one you're watching, is nowhere to be seen. Now, I don't know what's happened to it. However, I do want it to be posted and go up at the due time. So I'm doing this off my laptop, and we'll see how it goes. We're looking at episode 193. And this is the arrest of Jesus. Jesus is, as we saw in the last episode, is in Gethsemane, and he is now surrounded by a group that have come from the temple authorities to arrest him. And Jesus speaks to Judas, and we pick up the narrative at Matthew chapter 26, verses 50 through to 56. Jesus said to Judas, "Friend, do what you are here to do." Then they came and laid hands on Jesus and arrested him. Suddenly one of those with Jesus put his hand on his sword, drew it, and struck the slave of the high priest, cutting off his ear. Then Jesus said to him, "Put your sword back in its place, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword. Do you think that I cannot appeal to my Father, and he will at once send me more than 2 legions of angels? But how then would the scriptures be fulfilled which say it must happen this way?" At that hour, Jesus said to the crowds, "Have you come out with swords and clubs to arrest me as though I were a bandit? Day after day I sat in the temple teaching, and you did not arrest me. But all this has taken place so that the scriptures of the prophets may be fulfilled." Then all the disciples deserted him and fled. There are a couple of issues I'd like to examine as we engage with this passage. It could be that they're connected. The first is Jesus' reaction to the swordsman. John's Gospel tells us that this was Simon Peter. And what is he saying? For all who take the sword will die by the sword. This points to the issue of habitual life choices and where they ultimately lead. And I don't think it's necessarily about one-off event, but a kind of trajectory that we find ourselves on. The Greek philosopher Heraclitus famously postulated that character is destiny. Hear that again. Character is destiny. We ultimately are the sum of the choices that we make. The choices we make in a consistent direction ultimately determine who we become, what kind of human being we become, one that others either hate, avoid, or despise, or one they love, want to be around, and respect. I believe that Jesus is saying much more than what appears on the surface. It occurs to me that he's also questioning with Peter if this is the best way of getting what you want, or preventing what you don't want, by violence. Ultimately, it comes back to bite you. Way back in Matthew chapter 7, verse 2, remember a while ago in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus also says, "For the same way you judge others, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you." There's a sense that what goes around comes around. We've also been discovering that Jesus' plan is to break out of this zero-sum game way of living, where we have people winning by ensuring that others lose, using violence as the ultimate way of losing by winning. Kind, generous, compassionate people can often be taken for granted, but they are also likely to be the ones that others gather around to help when they're in trouble. On the other hand, the nasty, cruel, and vicious are likely to find themselves on their own when it becomes clear that an irreversible defeat is at hand. So that's the first thing. We become according to the choices we make. The next question that Jesus raises for us is, Does God need defending? If God is sovereign, I see no reason why we would need to come to his defense. My observation is that God has many ways of reaching people and of reaching past them if they become obstacles. We can be horrified at the things that people say about God and feel a need to defend his honor. I'm not convinced that it's necessary. I'm more concerned for them, for the judgment they ultimately bring upon themselves, as it's by their own words that they are judged. And it's a sense of alienation that they're creating between themselves and God, and separating themselves from God and putting themselves beyond the reach of God and making it more difficult for themselves to be open to the love of God. I'm not even sure that God gets particularly bothered by those who, on the basis of the evidence they see, judge God to be a cruel, vindictive despot. At least it's a sign that they care about human suffering. I remember a story that I read some years ago in one of Anthony de Mello's books about Father Abraham. A beggar came to his tent one night, desperate for food. Abraham goes to considerable trouble to prepare a meal for him. As they're about to eat, Abraham prays a grace, at which this man starts to cuss and swear and say all kinds of abusive things about God. Abraham flies into a rage. Grabs the man by his clothes and flings him outside into the darkness. At prayer that night, Abraham heard the gentle words of the Lord. I've been looking after that man in his ingratitude, keeping him alive for the past 50 years, living with his constant abuse. Could you not put up with him for one single meal? And this kind of links back to who we're becoming. As a result of the trajectory of our choices, the direction in which they are, living in a graced way, quietly confident of God's love and presence, so much of our defense of God may in fact be a defense of our own doubts and fears. We don't need to strive. As the prophet Isaiah says, in quietness and trust is your strength. Well, God bless you.